Hey guys, All in Crypto here, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another YouTube video. I hope you've all had a fantastic Friday so far. It is the morning, so good morning, everybody. If it's not the morning where you are, good afternoon or good evening. Today we're going to be diving into our daily cryptocurrency market update. We're going to be taking a macro view on the cryptocurrency market in this video. The markets are in fear. Now, we're not in, or we are still in extreme fear. Sorry, we were a bit lower than this yesterday. And I can understand why. There's lots of uncertainty at the moment. It's uncertain times for markets as a whole, and we will be diving into the S&P, the FTSE, which is the UK's 100 largest stocks, and of course the Nasdaq, which have all seen a sell-off. This, of course, is due to what the Federal Reserve essentially is saying. The minutes came out from the Fed, and they said, look, they are indeed going to start reducing the balance sheet. They're going to look to up interest rates and so on and so forth. And this is caused quite a scared market, an uncertain market. Now, we have done data and looked into data that suggests rate hikes. Typically, markets will continue to run for 6 months after a new regime kicks in. But crypto isn't really a part of that data. That's talking about the traditional market. So what plays out for crypto? Now, one thing, and remember, we've got this macro battle taking place between the dollar and Bitcoin. It was really the whole reason that Satoshi created Bitcoin was due to, I think it was something from the Times in the UK where they were talking about the second bailout of banks. And, you know, Satoshi essentially created Bitcoin as a fair monetary system that isn't just inflated and you know, devalued, thus hurting the citizens. So one of the most significant events that people often mislook, maybe in Bitcoin's history, I'm not so sure. Potentially the Genesis block would have been the most significant event of Bitcoin's history, but was March 2020. This was significant for not only Bitcoin, but for markets across the board. So for the S&P, if you look at what happened, you had this dip, and it's gone on to absolutely smash new all-time highs. Same thing with the Nasdaq. FTSE's not necessarily the case. You can see it was a very severe dip, and we've not actually made or gone back to our previous highs before March 2020. But that's probably because there's a lot of travel and leisure within this industry. But markets, essentially, what this did was it set into motion a massively inflationary event for fiat systems. Governments around the world found themselves backed up against the corner and had no other choice but to inflate the very thing that these commodities, stocks, equities, cryptos are valued against, and that is the dollar. And that was the breeding ground for this. Not just for Bitcoin, for Ethereum, which has done absolutely, since March 2020, I mean, this chart for Ethereum is so strong. Could be due a bit of a correction. We are going to dive into this, the 4-year cycle theory, because, the two main theories are the 4-year cycle theory and the lengthening cycle theory. The super cycle theory, which I kind of subscribe to, but I think it ties in with the lengthening cycle theory, which essentially dictates that we're going to go on more of a, we're going to have these kind of shorter dips. We're not going to have such a long, drawn-out bear market. We're going to just kind of move continuously upwards with moderate and regular pullbacks along the way, which I do also subscribe to. But could this be playing out again, but on a smaller level? We will see. We'll get into Bitcoin because there's something that I don't want to see set up. You potentially could be forming some sort of a head and shoulders here. With this as your neckline, which I really would not like to see. If we come up with for a weak right shoulder and we don't see any sort of significant rally, that's something we will be paying attention to. But there's so much uncertainty at the moment. All the stock to flows and everything has gone out the window, and it's really to do with the fact that Bitcoin is now very tethered as a more mature market, along with other markets across the board, to what's going on with the Federal Reserve and monetary policy. And that's why we're having this sort of slowdown, certainly at the moment, is due to the fact that liquidity is going to become more expensive. People are going to take risk off the table, and crypto being risky and certainly Bitcoin being liquid, people will certainly mitigate that risk by selling their positions essentially, or taking up opposing positions in fiat systems, ready to purchase whatever comes after this. So we still think that Bitcoin is in a bull run, but we think there's a lot of headwind ahead of us. Now, Ethereum, for example, I listened to, we covered it on a couple of videos ago, we Cardano video, we were speaking about the Bankless podcast where Vitalik was talking about the fact that ETH2 isn't looking like it's going to be ready anytime soon. That's hugely negative for Ethereum, in my opinion. And you're going to see the rise of a lot of these layer ones. Cardano, for example, which doesn't even seem to get a mention in most sort of mainstream media outlets or media publications, even though it is, in my opinion, the ultimate competitor to Ethereum, is going to do well in this time, certainly with the turning on of their smart contracts. So I think something like Cardano could potentially set its own pace and go on a little bit of a run here, despite Bitcoin maybe being a little bit lopsided. And this is what we're essentially looking at for Bitcoin. What happened over in May, playing out again today. And there's a confirming factor potentially for that in this indicator. This is the dormancy flow. Can be used to time market lows. We're currently at March crash levels by the dip, question mark. Of course, that's not financial advice. And this is from the Rational Root. I really like this guy. He's well worth a follow. So shouts out to him. Bitcoin entity adjustment, dormancy flow. And this is pretty much timed the bottoms previously, and you're there today. So I do think you are quite likely to see some sort of a relief rally. Dangerous thing about this relief rally is that you're kind of at what potentially could set up to be a neckline. And I wouldn't want to see something like this play out. But ultimately, you guys know that I do indeed believe that, you know, Bitcoin is going to continue upwards. This whole market at $2 trillion is going to continue in the right direction, in my opinion. That's something I'm very certain about. There's just going to be a little bit of turbulence within that. And that's what you're experiencing today due to all the kind of external pressures. This is an article here that reads, Bitcoin slips to 3-month low. Analysts divided on impact of the Fed's tightening. So when they bolster up, and this is something that you all need to pay attention to, even if you're just in crypto, you need to look at the world around you and kind of broaden your horizon. Dollar against Bitcoin. They're paired against one another, and they're extremely correlated in their movement. So if the dollar gains strength, what do you think happens to Bitcoin? However, there is a bit of a saving grace with what I'm saying here, and contradictory point that I'm going to raise. If the dollar gains strength, that's likely to see weakness within other currencies. Turkish lira is a prime example. What do those currencies do against Bitcoin, those currencies that get weaker? I would suggest Bitcoin keeps going up against them, but potentially loses a little bit of ground against the dollar. What does that do to the price? Well, maybe you could end up in a situation where they're both going up at the same time. That could be a bit of a factor, but we are ultimately expecting this to continue. This is another thing from the Rational Root. And he's laid out the 4-year cycle theories here. We've done that on our Brave New Liquid Coin Index, where we've overlaid bar patterns of the previous cycle. March 2020, absolutely significant in terms of a bull run. This is March. This is the first time this cycle, out of the three, so the fourth cycle is the first time you've actually crossed over your previous cycle in terms of ROI. March 2020, the most significant event that Bitcoin potentially could have gone on. The most bullish event, and of course we're dealing potentially what you're looking at, major inflationary event, cool down period. Major inflationary event, cool down period. That's what I think, you know, this could be the new bear market. This could be what it looks like, and we're coming out the other end of it. You just don't know, guys. But one thing that you have got to always fall back on is your fundamentals. Do you believe in this technology? Do you think it's going to impact the world in a big way? Do you think it's going to continue to get adopted? And value comes from all those factors that I've mentioned. So we are still believing that this cycle is going to continue. We think there's plenty of evidence for that. You can see that this trend line typically does act as a kind of springboard. This is confirmed with a number of other factors associated with it, like this one over here. We've shown you plenty of these that sort of tried to call the bottom or suggested that we're in extremely oversold territory, where we are today for Bitcoin, focusing on Bitcoin because the entire market just follows it. And of course, you know, if Bitcoin's having a really bad day, and we witnessed that yesterday, the entire market will sell off with it. Some coins are showing relative strength against it, like Polygon. Why do you think Polygon may be doing so well? We're going to do a video on Polygon because I think Polygon's going to continue to flourish as a layer 2, as a feasible option to use Ethereum, even though it's on a layer 2, and it's going to gain ground in terms of against Ethereum. So what have I got next? This is the BTC stock jumps 44% after announcing first ever dividend payable in Bitcoin. Remember, we haven't even got a spot ETF in the United States. That is coming. Bitcoin has yet to see a lot of adoption, a lot of interest. We covered the article from Goldman Sachs talking about how they think Bitcoin is actually going to eat into gold's market share. Why is that? Well, it's a faster horse in the race. Gold, as somebody who was in precious metals before I was in crypto, they've been lackluster, to be honest with you. You know, I used to stack on a continuous basis, on a weekly basis. I used to pick up ounces, not of gold, of silver. I wish of gold. At the time, I didn't have that much money, so I chose silver for a number of reasons. But that's why I've tangent. But so we're yet to see a huge amount of adoption coming for Bitcoin. And remember that throughout these volatile time periods, just remember what's going on here. It's a technological revolution, a kindred to the internet, a kindred to the PC, and the companies that do well out of that often end up becoming the biggest companies in the world. And with the scope of blockchain, it's huge. It's far more niche than something, or far less niche than something like Microsoft or Apple. It has a far wider reach. It can essentially do those things. Incorrect. It's not hardware necessarily in terms of some of what we see, but the scope for it is huge. The audience, the target audience is massive, and that's what you've got to remember. Certainly for these smart contract protocols, which is why we're so bullish on them, because you can do a lot with them. They're far more usable than Bitcoin. Quick side note, I actually think that Bitcoin will get flipped in the future, potentially, although there is the sort of argument that it becomes the store of value. And we see companies aping into it as they're holding a lot of cash. Why are companies holding a lot of cash, by the way? We looked at the top 6 companies in the United States, and 5 out of 6 were holding far more cash than they were debt. So does that suggest that they're expecting a bit of a cool-off and looking to take advantage? It could be in play. But this video is really about talking about the macro view. Remember, March 2020, extremely significant, huge inflationary event. Is this the cool-off from that? Ready for continuation? That's what I'm sort of expecting. We were expecting this to play out. It still could. You could see a bit of a bounce back into it, find it as support, and then see that continuation. Ultimately, the view that we are going to see continuation still remains. How we see that, it is really up for debate. But it's certainly an uncertain time in markets. One reason I think people are worried as well, and I'll talk about it very quickly, is this is our 4-year cycle theory. I put it to the weekly so you can see it a little bit more accurately. We're kind of starting 2022 in the same way we started 2018 or prior to that 2014. Maybe not in as a volatile manner, but we're certainly dipping into it. Now, people will be expecting, many people are saying sell your crypto at the end of the year due to this repeating. So people are kind of looking at this and saying, okay, but this has been really a sideways year, not what we'd expect for the end of the 4-year cycle theory. And all of this ties back into March 2020 being a massively inflationary event, and pushing everything above and beyond, and so on and so forth. So that's really all I have for you. We will be keeping you up to date with what actually happens with the Fed, what they decide to do, take a look at other markets. We know that this sold off significantly, for example. Same thing really took place with the S&P and the NASDAQ that took place with Bitcoin. March 2020, massively inflationary event. Do we get a cool down period? We've not really seen a significant cool down period for this. So do we end up going into something like this and then continuation like we have done previously? You know, it's all sort of unknown at the moment, but will become apparent as this year goes on. But one thing that I'm very confident on is that, you know, crypto's here to stay and it's going to do extremely well. And something like Cardano I actually think is going to do well in the very near future, almost regardless of what Bitcoin's doing, due to the fact that it's going to become infinitely more used and in demand based on the fact that dApps are going to go live. This is really going to drive the underlying token utility. And yeah, so that's really all I have for you guys. I didn't want to waffle on too much, just a short and sweet update, reminding you of what you need to pay attention to. Don't be so doom and gloom. It's an amazing time to be alive. And ultimately, you know, you guys are still very early in what, in my opinion, is going to turn out to be a technology that changes the world and implements itself in our day-to-day lives. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the content, a like is always appreciated. So is a comment, and I'll catch you all in the next YouTube video. Thank you.